Alrighty, hello everyone. My name is Timothy Song, and today I will be giving a presentation on the different types of assessments that are typically found in a classroom setting and in a learning environment, and how they're typically used by teachers and other educators, by parents, and then finally even by students. And I am the author of this presentation. It was created in the year 2020, and I'm also the presenter of this presentation. All right, let's get started. So first, I would like to talk about the principles that are associated with assessment for all children. So there are a couple basic principles that you should follow, and they are as follows: that the assessment should firstly use multiple sources of information. So the assessment should not only just be in one setting or come from one child or be in one like period of time. It should come from a longer period of time for multiple children and different groups of children, different kinds of learning environments. It should be all encompassing. It shouldn't just be a singular small snapshot of the child. It should be a larger, greater picture. And then secondly, it should benefit the child and improve learning. So assessment shouldn't just be for the sake of assessing a child or the sake of testing. It should always be for trying to improve the learning environment experience for the child, and also trying to improve the way that the child's be absorbing that information or gathering that information. It should always be for the purpose of benefiting the child and improving the learning environment and improving the teacher's performance in that learning environment. And then third, it should involve the child and the family. So at all opportunities, if possible, the teacher should try and get the family involved. Should have the parent maybe doing activities at home that would help the child on the next assessment. They should be telling the parents what things they could be doing in the child's daily life to help them improve for the next round of testing. And maybe it could even give activities for the families to take home. The family should be integrally involved, and they should always be informed about what the child's the level that that child is achieving at, and stuff like that. And finally, it should be fair for all children. So the information on the assessment shouldn't just be accessible for a certain small group of children. It should be generalized knowledge that the teacher has given to everyone, and it should be free of bias, free of any sort of racism or anything like that. It should be accessible for everyone. The next one. The next, we're going to be talking about what is assessment. So I want you to think about it for a little bit. Come back together. Okay. So now that you've thought about it for a little bit, assessment is the process of gathering information about children in several forms of evidence, then organizing and interpreting that information. So basically what we talked about before, gathering various sources of information, a record of the children's performance in the classroom, and then you organize that information so that you're able to interpret it and it's understandable, and someone who's viewing it can therefore understand it. And that should be different for the different audiences that you have. It should be different from if you're giving it to a parent, if you're giving it to a child, and then you interpret that information, whether that be a statistical analysis, putting it into a graph form, or trying to represent the data in a different way. We just want to be able to take that information and then use it to effectively decide what are the changes that need to be made in the classroom, what are the changes that need to be made to maybe to teaching style of the teacher, and what are the main changes that would improve the student's experience in the classroom as a whole. The next thing that we want to talk about is what is the purpose of assessments? Why do we even have assessments in the first place? So one of the main purposes of assessments is firstly evaluation. So assessing a child's development overall or in a specific developmental domain, making sure that they're achieving at their level in the classroom at that certain developmental domain, that they're hitting their milestones, and this allows us to evaluate them in a detailed and kind of fair manner. Then to diagnosis, so identifying a developmental delay or causes for poor performance in learning, as well as to identify strengths. So in certain cases, there may be an instance where a child has a certain developmental delay and need extra help in the classroom. And so by assessing them, we can get kind of more data on whether or not the child indeed has developmental delay or has a specific reason for poor performance, and then we can go and help them with that. Thirdly, for placement, to place a student in a traditional program or to provide special services. So this allows us to decide whether or not a student needs additional services like a speech therapist to come in, or a physical and motor specialist to come in to help them in a certain area that they may be weaker. And then fourthly, for program planning. So used to plan individualized programs to serve students. So by getting all that data and learning what students are weak at, then teachers can therefore design an individualized educational plan for each of their students that specifically targets the areas that they're weakest at and helps them improve in those areas. Great. Okay, so the first kind of assessments that we're going to be talking about are standardized tests. So standardized tests are very, very common. Most people have seen them if they've gone through some sort of educational system. And there's very many different types of standardized tests. There's intelligence tests, achievement tests, aptitude tests, personality tests, and even interest inventories. So the first one, intelligence tests, are to assess the overall intellectual functioning of students and to assess how well they're absorbing material in the classroom. Two is for achievement, which is to assess the extent to which a person has acquired certain information or mastered a certain skill. So certain things that may be taught in the classroom, are they able to give it back to you and to assess their achievement. And then aptitude is to assess the potential to learn or the potential ability to develop a proficiency in a certain area. The personality standardized test is to assess a person's tendency to behave in a particular way, whether or not they have certain tendencies, they have something that might trigger them, stuff like that. And then an interest inventory is to assess whether or not a person has a certain interest in the area. So do certain students gravitate more towards STEM subjects? Do other students gravitate more towards humanities subjects? Where are they most interested in? That will help teacher help design their lesson plan. And then standardized tests are used to identify certain developmental and physical disorders. So as stated previously, we can diagnose with these tests if they get below a certain score. Then we can also measure achievement in a certain academic subject. So we can see how they score in different areas or different subjects, and then we can target areas that they're weaker at when they have lower scores. And then finally, to compare and contrast the performance of students from a variety of backgrounds. So we can see whether or not students from a certain area or a certain school are performing differently than other students from different areas or maybe a different schooling environment. And then compare and contrast to see why there are differences, how can we maybe bridge the gap between the two, how can we improve the systems overall. The next form of assessments are observations. So there's different types of observations: anecdotal record or running record, a time sampling, an event sampling, and even checklist and rating scales. So for an anecdotal record, it's a typical observation. It's a written description of behavior. A running record is more detailed narrative that includes kind of sequential events. So what is the sequence of events that happens? Time sampling involves the frequency of behaviors in a designated period of time. And then event sampling is when the behavior tends to occur in a particular setting. And then checklists and rating scales are basically just lists of behaviors that are arranged in the system categories, or a rating scale, which is your ability to determine whether or not the child exhibits a behavior and to what degree and quality they exhibit that behavior. And the purposes of observations are to understand a child's behavior, to evaluate children's development, and to evaluate their learning progress in the classroom overall. These are very common. And then to go into more detail about checklists, rating scales, and rubrics. So there's different types of checklists: developmental, curriculum checklists, numerical and graphic ratings, holistic and analytic and developmental rubrics. So basically, developmental are for milestone indicators. Curriculum checklists are based on what the students are learning. Numerical ones are just with numbers. Graphical are where the rater can mark them on a line that has categories on it. Holistic is a single score. Analytic is a range of descriptors, and it kind of resembles a grid. And developmental is on a continuum that shows developmental process. And so teachers use these to evaluate checklist objectives by observation. They use these for learning activities and specific tasks, on report cards, evaluating the learning environments, evaluating performances, and evaluating progress in development and learning in the classroom. Then another form is teacher-designed assessments. So these may involve oral and tasks and oral responses. So asking a student to do a task and then getting responses from oral questions. They may involve printed activities with pictures and maybe some written words. And then for a specific topic or target objective, some of the other uses are data-driven decision-making, diagnostic testing for student evaluation, or evaluation of a local instructional program. The next one are performance-based assessments. These involve interviews, contracts, directed assignments, games, work samples, projects, and portfolios. So interviews, we're finding out what the children are understanding. Contracts, we're providing a plan. Directed assignments are for specific tasks. Games are just to assess their progress with a skill. Work samples are examples that demonstrate progress, and then projects are longer, lengthier group projects, and portfolios are gathering information that can be stored. We're going to talk about them more in the next slide. These are a contrast to high-stakes testing, and they're used to evaluate whether an early education program is meeting the needs of young students. You can use them to find out what the children understand and what a child's progress with a particular skill or concept may be. Now we have portfolio assessment. There's different types of portfolios. There's working, evaluative, showcase, archival, preschool, and electronics. So a working portfolio is just collective examples of students' work. Evaluative is when the teacher puts particular materials in there to be able to evaluate the students' development in certain areas maybe, or in a particular subject. Showcase is the best work that a student has. Archival is following a student from year to year, so showing the development over the course of different years. Preschool is just a portfolio in preschool, and then electronic is an online portfolio that parents can access at any time. These are used for assessment and evaluation, for self-assessment and reflection by the student, and then reporting progress to parents. The teachers being able to report how a child's doing in the classroom to the parent. That's our final type or category of assessments. And in conclusion, so assessments are an integral part of a successful learning environment. They not only allow teachers, parents, and even students to know how well they're grasping the material being taught, but also allow for reflection on the data gathered from such assessments. And the reflection on that data is really crucial to improving classroom practices and the learning environment as a whole. Thank you for attending my presentation. And